You had some pretty good hunts in October with a ghillie suit.
I did. Ghillie suit, I'm a firm believer in ghillie suits. I'm not a firm believer in the ghillie suit that I have because it's got the material on it picks up every single leaf that it touches. So I go walking around sounding like a bag of Doritos, and it's ridiculous. But I did have I'd had a couple cool hunts. It might have been my first ghillie suit hunt. I had guessed that these deer, and I guess that kind of goes. Every hunt that I had this year, this was my first year of being extremely mobile. I didn't hunt any presets. I don't think I hunted a single preset. I didn't. All the spots that I picked out to hunt were basically picked out from looking at a map, with the exception of our Ohio lease where we've hunted for a couple years. But it was kind of cool. The ghillie suit even made that better. The first hunt with that ghillie suit, I went down. There's a right-of-way that was full of clover, and back in the woods there was a big point, and it was just super thick back in there. And I found a giant tree that was just probably like a 200-year-old tree. It was just a monster. And so I just kind of got in behind it with my camera on a tripod beside the tree, and had a little spike come through. And then up probably 80 yards ahead of me, I saw a buck come out of the bedding, what I thought was the bedding would be, and move up towards that clover. I just saw a big deer. I didn't know it was a buck at that point. I just knew it was a big-bodied deer. So I just slowly walked out to that right away, and at one point I had him at probably 20 yards, and his body was in the right away, his head was in the brush, and I could see him there. And at first I thought, well, no, that's probably that spike buck that's in here just fooling around. And then he pulls his head out, and I was like, oh, well, I'd probably shoot that buck. He was probably, 80, 90 inch 8-point, but from the ground, self-filmed, like,
for sure.
All that stuff, picking the spot by a map, I was like, I'll shoot him. And I got full draw on him. There was a rainstorm coming in, and by the time I had a shot at him, he was like probably pushing 40 yards. And if the rainstorm wasn't coming, I'd have probably taken the shot, but I don't know. It was already, I think I'd already killed a couple deer at that point. Yeah. So I wasn't hurting for meat, and it wasn't a giant or anything. So I passed him up. And then I had another really cool experience with the ghillie. Behind my house, there's a little 40-acre parcel that I'm allowed to hunt. And I had a black coyote come into 50 yards.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
And I wanted to shoot that thing so bad. There never was a chance. But both that 8-point stared me down. And I was standing, by the time I had a shot, I had snuck my way out behind a brush pile and ended up stepping out into the right of way in the wide open in that ghillie suit. And he would look at me, and I thought, oh, he's going to take off. And he'd put his head back down and start eating. And I'd walk towards him. I was going to try to close the distance a little bit and just see how close I could get him, because I wasn't that excited about shooting that buck. And I'd take a couple steps, and I'd step on a branch or something, and he'd pick his head up and look at me, and then he'd go back to eating again. And it was just cool. Those ghillie suits really do work. I'm not a huge fan of hunting on the ground. It's just hard to do. And I like to film. Like Jared said, he's a loner. I'm kind of the same way. Me and him live 20 minutes apart. We never film each other hunt because we both like to hunt by ourselves. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, it's a different way of doing things. In the right situation, those ghillie suits would just be absolutely killer. Like,
sure.
There's certain spots that I have in my head that I want to try next year, and probably scout first. But it was a good experience, a lot of fun. I just need a different ghillie suit, because that thing is, and it's hot. I mean, the one day I hunted, it was 40 degrees out, and I was sweating like crazy in that ghillie suit. So I'll have to get me another one, but it was a blast trying it.
Yeah, I actually just got a ghillie suit for Christmas. It's pretty sweet. So I'm gonna, it's just another tool in the tactics. Just something different. Not every spot is going to be set up perfect to get up in a tree. So in the spot I actually, I hunted another public land spot that I scouted out this spring, and I went into there. This is mid-October time frame, same time he was just doing that ghillie hunt. But I went back into this public land. It's like 2 miles from the truck. I mean, it's a hike back in there, and the tree that I was using it's so thick in there. Getting up in a tree just makes it really tough. And I was only 2 sticks high, so maybe 10, 12 feet up in this tree. And the deer, I thought I had it kind of figured out where they were bedding at, but I guessed wrong for sure. They were bedded kind of behind me and not out in front of me like I thought they would be. And I had an encounter with a really nice buck, a really nice 9-pointer. This was right after the other encounter with buck on private land. So, I mean, I was getting into deer. It's just I couldn't get a shot at him. I had the other buck at 20 yards, didn't get a shot. And then this buck on public land, I had him at 25 yards, and it's just a wall of brush. And I actually found out that there were some apple trees dropping right up above where I was set up. And I had a camera in there that I'd left for 2 months, and I could not find that camera. Every time I went back in there, I wanted to see what deer was using this spot, and I would go in and hunt, and I didn't, want to tramp through the brush and all that stuff, making a bunch of noise, so I didn't check the camera. My plan was to get down and find the camera after dark, and I could not find the camera. I actually got lost in there one night. I guess I just took a wrong turn coming out, and I mean, I was in the middle of the nastiest brush pile you could ever imagine. This is the stuff that I need to film because you guys would just die laughing. Yeah. It was awful.
It's funny, that night he was texting me when he saw that big buck. He said, I got to shoot her at 20 yards. And I knew how long it took him to get in there and how big of a pain it was. And I was like, honey, you want to go grocery shopping? Because, you want to go look at sheets at Bed Bath & Beyond? Because Jared's about to kill a buck and I got to be doing something. So I
really don't want to drag it out there. But I actually used my frame pack that I used out on my Wyoming trip. I was just going to quarter him out and carry him out. But, yeah, it didn't work out. I didn't get a shot at him. I think I ended up going back in there a third time, and I finally found my camera and got to check it, and it was actually pretty surprising for public land. There were some pretty good deer back in there, and but once the apples were gone, the bucks were gone. So I definitely got to plan a little better, plan for like the first weekend of season, going in there and trying to get one of those deer. Because once those apples are gone, there's just no telling where they go. But it's a pretty cool spot. It's a pain in the butt to get to, but I think I'm going to eventually pull a buck out of there.
Yeah, it'd be a cool spot to pull one out of, that's for sure. Yeah.
And we did our first kayak hunt on public land. That was a lot of fun. This was a year for first, a lot of first time things this year, a lot of public land that we really haven't done.
Yeah. And that was probably, it honestly might have been, even though we really didn't see anything that day, me and you went, that might have been one of my favorite hunts. Coming back out of that place in the dark, in a kayak, and the sky was completely like full of stars, and the fog was rising up.
Yeah, it was really cool.
If you would have been a woman, I'd have kissed you. It was so romantic.
It was very romantic.
No, it was just a cool feeling. It was really neat to get up in there. And that spot, I mean, how much buck sign was there? It was just unreal, the buck sign. That's where I'd like to pull a buck out of next year. And I want to run some cameras and see what's really over there, because the sign... What the sign shows is there's some studs there.
Yeah, for sure. And we hunted a couple more times, and we can get into that. But as far as October, I killed a doe the 24th, right behind the house. I saw several deer that evening and got a good shot on. It wasn't a real big doe, but put a good shot on her and watched her fall over. That was October 24th, and then. Did you have any hunts toward the end of October that were...
I didn't do a lot in October. Let's see. I killed my public land, my urban buck on the 18th, I believe it was.
Okay, so...
So that was... After that, I didn't hunt for several weeks. That was when my dog got... if you watch any of these other videos, my dog got cancer and was real sick for a month or almost 2 months, and then died. The urban hunt buck was probably my last buck, and my last hunt in October, I think. After that, it was on to the rut in Ohio.
Yeah, so I actually had a couple good hunts at the very end of October. Actually, Halloween night, I went back to that bedding area where that big 9 was at, hoping that, maybe being out of there for a little while, that, my pressure, maybe he'd come back in there, and set up in the same tree. Man, that night was awesome. There was bucks pushing does in that bedding area. And, I'm sitting there and I see this deer coming down off this point, and I immediately thought he was a shooter. I grabbed the bow, get the camera rolling, and this deer comes strolling in, and he fooled me a little bit. Like his body was tiny. I mean, a super small little deer, but he had a pretty decent 9-point rack, and it's a buck I've never seen before. So I was at full draw on him, had the pin on him, camera zoomed in perfect, and I'd been hunting super hard and hadn't had a chance at a buck, and I wanted to kill one so bad. And this deer does not know how lucky he is, because I'm
not very good at letting down.
Yeah.
Usually the only way my bow goes down is when an arrow is fired.
I'm the same way. But I drew back on this buck 3 times. And I mean, I had my thumb on that trigger with pressure on it. He's, a little bit more pressure on that trigger and he'd have been dead meat. I mean, he was 16 yards broadside, but I ended up passing him up. And I'm glad I did. I really think he was a year-old buck with just a really good rack. He could have been 2, but he was just a small little body.
Good one next year to
for sure.
After.
So that was 3 bucks in that one area that were pretty decent that I saw. But November 3rd, we actually hunted together at Dad's.
Oh yeah.
And so I got 2 good spots that are good to catch a cruising buck, kind of on the side of this ridge. I killed my 2016 buck in this one spot, and I kind of told Grant where to go.
Right, kind of.
And he got lost.
He said, go down there about 75 yards. There's a big rock on the right and a bunch of mountain laurel on the left. Well, this was, 5 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah.
So I end up way far away and just kept walking, and I'm like, I don't see a rock anywhere. And so I ended up almost in the spot you were talking about anyway, because I got out on X and was looking, and I was like, this seems like a good spot. I'm going to go there.
He overshot it by about 100 yards, but he was still in a pretty decent spot. But I set up, just out the ridge, maybe a quarter mile from him. And it was nasty that morning, wasn't it? It was raining and cold.
Raining and windy and cold, yeah.
And, I'm sitting there, hadn't seen anything, and then, I turn around and here comes a buck cruising up this ridge, like fast. He was closing in fast. So I grab my bow, spin around the tree, draw back, and I stop him right in, wide open lane, wide open where he was at. And I put the pin on him, and I executed a perfect shot, and there was a limb about 5 feet in front of my bow, and I smoked that thing. The arrow went 10 feet over his back. I mean, just completely missed him, which, looking back, I didn't really care at all. He wasn't a big deer. He was a decent 8. That was a pretty fun hunt.
Did you get him on video?
Yeah, I did.
Did you?
I did get that shot on video, so yeah, I'll show that shot. But that was November 3rd, and then pretty much from there we go to Ohio, back to our lease for the rut. So you didn't. When did you come over? We went.
You guys went on a Wednesday, right?
We went on a Wednesday night, so we could hunt Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and possibly Tuesday. So that's 6 days of hunting. So the very first morning. It's cold, it's clear. We had the right wind to hunt the same spot that me and Grant hunted the year before, and we had the buck we call Flyer walk right past us and didn't get a shot. So I set up in this spot for this buck, just because historically he comes through this area, during the rut. And it was just cracking daylight. I couldn't see quite yet. It was still dark. I couldn't see. I hear a deer coming up the ridge, the same exact spot he had come the year before. And he walks right behind me, 20 yards, and it's just light enough that I can tell that it's him. So come to full draw, try to get the pin on him. I cannot see him through my peep. And I didn't know if there was limbs in the way. I just didn't want to risk that shot, he didn't know I was there, so I didn't want to spook him or anything like that. And he ended up going up the ridge, and he kind of there's a little low gap up there in the road. He goes up there and he skylined himself, and I got a good look at him. And then he went on out the ridge and walked past my cell camera, so I got a good picture of him there. And then that day was just absolute insanity. There was bucks running everywhere. Right after he left, it got light enough to shoot. A doe comes flying over the ridge. She walks right past me 20 yards, and behind her is a big, tall 10-pointer. I mean, just a gorgeous looking buck. And I thought he was going to walk, right where she did, but he ended up kind of going up the ridge trying to cut her off. And he got to within 35 yards. I just never did have a shot. But he chased that doe off, grunting like crazy. And then it was like an hour later, another really good buck comes cruising out of this clear cut, walks the same path that 10-point took. So at that point, that's 3 shooters in 2 hours that went through that spot. So I packed up my stuff. It was like 9:30 in the morning. I climbed down. I go up to where those bucks had went through and picked another tree and climbed up. And then I didn't see anything else till evening. There was a real tall looking 6-pointer just going absolutely nuts. He was chasing whatever he could find. He was chasing spikes. He was chasing does. He was going to rape somebody, I can tell you right now. But he ran from one end of the property to the other. He ran underneath Dad's stand. He went underneath Casey's stand. He come back, ran by me 3 different times, I think. I mean, I could have killed him every time. But there was another buck down toward the clear cut that evening, and you can't hear it on video. I wish you could. He was down there, the deepest, lowest grunt you could make, like a growl. He was down there growling, and it had to have been either flyer or that big 10, I would say. But man, that spot is such a good spot.
Yeah, that was the day I'm at work and my phone is just blowing up, and it's like, got a shooter in here 35 yards, couldn't shoot him. And then Jared's dad would be like, that son of a bitch is in here. I can't get a shot at him either. And it was just those bucks had to just been running that day, and it was killing me, absolutely killing me. And I got home that evening. I was like, honey, I'm going to Ohio. I don't care. I'm getting out of here and I'm going to Ohio. That was crazy, the amount of bucks you all saw. And this is 63 acres.
63 acres, yeah.
So a small little piece of property. It's just set up right. And there's actually a lot of spots you can hunt on it for 63 acres and not bother each other, not mess each other up. And if you're smart about how you hunt it and play the wind right, you can hunt a lot of different good spots.
Yeah. And that day was really good. And then those bucks must have got locked down with the first does that were coming into heat, because Friday, I didn't see hardly anything Friday, a couple small bucks. Then Saturday is when you got there, right?
I thought I got there Friday.
Yeah, maybe you did. Whichever day you got there, it was nasty.
It was
pouring
raining.
down the rain.
Yeah, pouring down the rain.
I mean, it was definitely a cold front coming in. And so Grant went to the spot where I killed my 2017 buck. I mean, it's downwind of a doe bedding area.
Yeah, it's a perfect spot.
It's an awesome spot.
It's a really cool spot. The wind was perfect for it, and it's downwind of doe bedding, and there's a heavy trail that runs right through it. Well, there's a lot of trails that run right through it, but there's a good trail that runs just on the downwind side of it. And everything, these guys were in the trailer when we got up there, or when I got there, and they're like, yeah, Doug's a little picky. He's like, I'm not hunting in this stuff. And Jared's like, you could tell, after hunting a couple days, and they had a bad morning. Everybody was just so tired. And I was like, well, it's 1 o'clock on November I
think it was maybe the 10th.
10th, yeah. I mean, you're crazy to not be in the woods. And the forecast showed it, the rain stopping at 3 o'clock, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
So I got down in that spot, snuck in there real slow, real quiet, and sat there for about 2 hours. Jared was actually the spot that he's hunting, and like I said, this is a small property.
80 yards away.
He could see the umbrella on my tree. I never could see him, but he could see it, and we were that close.
I was just on the top side of the bedding area, kind of catching another travel route to the same spot he's going, basically.
Yeah.
But the funny thing was, you know, he's sitting down 80 yards away. I can see his tree umbrella in the tree. And, I mean, you could tell what happens, but the buck he ends up shooting, I had no clue it was there. I couldn't see it.
It must have been, the way the trails run in there, they can come out of the clear cut and either go up towards him or come down towards me and circle around the bottom side of it. And it just worked out perfectly. I sat there, and I jumped the gun a little bit. This buck wasn't that big. However, I've spent 5 years in Ohio, and I've shot at one giant. On our first lease, I shot it at an absolute stud of a buck. But every year, like I always say, you have one shot. Most likely, you're going to have one good chance at a nice buck. And with the way my year was going, I was like, and the way my past 5 years have gone, I was like, I'm not passing up an opportunity.
Yep.
And this buck came in, and I thought I put an absolute stellar hit on it. Like when my arrow hit the deer, there wasn't any worry. I wasn't like, I hope he's dead. When I hit him, I was like, yep, dead deer.
Yeah, so,
not a chance.
So I'm sitting 80 yards away, and I'm kind of looking back the other direction, away from where he's at, and I hear the arrow hit the deer. And if you've shot many deer through the rib cage, you know exactly what that sounds like. I mean, it's unmistakable. And I heard that, and I was like, that was an arrow going through a deer. So I pull up my binoculars, and I look down at Grant, and he's texting furiously.
Big smile on my face.
And I'm like, he just shot a buck. I know he did. And then I see him pick up his phone and put it to his ear, and then my phone rings. So I know that he had just shot one. So, he said that he, put a good hit on it, and I was freaking pumped. At this point, I'm shaking because I'm so excited for him.
Yeah. And everything really worked out perfectly from where the deer came from. I should have probably gave him a couple more steps to get a better angle on him, but like I said, I thought it was a dead deer, and it was a dead deer. That thing is not running around the woods today. It's dead somewhere. I got down and went and looked at the arrow. The arrow was just covered in blood. Like it was just soaked in blood. And there wasn't a lot of blood that we could see on the ground. However, it had just got done raining. Everything was shiny. You couldn't really pick out much blood. So we wait for everybody to get there. And we start tracking it and didn't find much for about 50 yards.
Yeah.
And then we started getting on real good blood.
It started picking up really good.
And that probably went for about 80 yards. And then there was a big pile. And the funny thing about where that big pile was, I could see that spot from where my tree stand was. And where that big pile was, he didn't stop there. I saw him run around the hill past that spot. So it was like a big bunch of blood churned out of him. Yeah. And past that spot, there was not a speck of blood anywhere. And the thing was, there weren't tracks. There weren't spots where he slid. There was absolutely no sign. It's like he disappeared. And I was just like, I went from so daggone excited to just so freaking upset about it. And it ruined my day, that's for sure. I went back in the next morning still thinking this buck is dead within 50 yards of this big pile of blood. And I searched every inch of that place out there. And if he made it, and he probably did make it another 100 yards, he's in the thickest clear cut. You can't walk through it. You can't get into it. And I think that's probably what he did. Yeah. Looking back, what I should have done after that morning was find someone with a dog, because it's legal in Ohio to do that. And I should have done that and recovered that buck, because I know he was dead, and everybody that was on the track was like, yeah, this thing is toast. But I don't know exactly where I must have hit him. I guess I might have just liver shot him. But it didn't, to me, sitting in the stand from where I was looking and the angle that I was shooting him at, I didn't think I thought it was lung. And that big pile of blood had a lot of bubbles in it.
It was pink, frothy looking blood.
Yeah. I don't know what happened, but, it's one of those things. You look back and think of all the things you could have done different. There's not a whole lot I would have done different, other than I might have stopped looking sooner at that. After we didn't find any blood past that, I might have stopped. But Again,
yeah, but
you know, I've had that happen, and I found them within 50 yards. I've had it happen, and I've never found them. So it's just, it's one of those things. It's hard to make a decision, but anyway, it was an experience. I was so excited. We were high-fiving and getting pats on the back for finally killing a buck in Ohio, and then I don't find it. So,
I mean, when I got down there and looked at the arrow, I mean, arrow's just coated in blood. I mean, you see an arrow like that, every time I've seen an arrow like that, it's a dead deer.
Yeah, and those broadheads I shoot G5 dead meat broadheads. They're 3-blade mechanical.
Cuts a big hole in them.
Cuts a big hole, and there wasn't a deer. That was the only deer that I shot this year out of the 5 that I killed that went more than 50 yards. Yeah. Every other one was dead within 50 yards, and most of them I saw fall from the stand. So,
and I mean the blood trail, when we got to the end where the blood stopped, I started looking down the hill like almost like the buck stopped, and then they do the death wobble sideways. I kind of thought maybe he just did that and fell over the hill dead, because I mean, it was a pile of blood. I mean,
giant. Size of a frying pan.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that, where a deer gets away. But it was like he just levitated into thin air. It really was weirdest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was a heartbreaker, but, it happens. And, it's happened to me before, not quite to that extreme. But, I've lost deer before, and it's always a shame when it happens. At least... got the experience, and maybe next time I won't push on and try to track them. Maybe next time I'll just call a dog and move along. But
you lost your deer. You didn't stick around after that. You went home.
No, my wife was sick, so I tracked that deer the next morning, and then she called me at like 2 or 3 o'clock. I was going to hunt, and I was actually going to hunt the spot that you ended up hunting and killing your buck in. But I got down there to that spot, and then she called me and said she was really not feeling well.
That's right.
I needed to go watch my daughter, so I packed up and headed home and cried the whole way home.
So me and Dad stayed. I think Casey hunted one more day, and then he kind of had enough and he left. And I just kind of figured that if we stick it out long enough, there's going to be a buck walk through one of these spots. Yeah. So it was the last morning. I just decided to hunt the spot. It's right below camp. It's 50 yards from the road, but it just sets up perfect for these bucks to cruise this ridge. It's a little strip of pines that butts up to the road, and there's a steep ditch that comes up the side of this ridge, and it funnels these deer right around it. They walk by this. We actually have a set of sticks in this tree. It's like one of the only spots we have preset. And I got up in that tree that morning. It's set up, and it was maybe 8:30, I think it was. I hadn't seen anything. It was super cold that morning. It was in the 20s, and I catch a flash of a deer running through the pines. I mean, he's moving quick, and I did not get a good look at him. I knew that he was tall and he was pretty wide. And if I could get him to stop in my lane, he was getting an arrow. So I stopped him. He stopped 15 yards. I had a tiny little opening to shoot through, and I squeezed that arrow through. Perfect shot right where I was aiming. I actually broke the onside leg where it went in. And he goes running off, his legs flopping, and he's not really running fast. He just got his tail down, just kind of trotting. And I kind of started second guessing myself. Maybe I hit him too low and just hit his leg. And then I saw him go sideways, and I'm pretty sure I saw him fall right there. So felt pretty good about the shot. I was pretty excited. I actually called Grant, I think, right after I shot him. Well, right after I shot the deer, so I think it was like 20-some seconds after I actually sent an arrow, I hear another deer coming up the ridge. So I turn around, and what deer is standing 15 yards away, flyer, standing broadside with no clue that I'm there.
A buck with 27 lives.
Yeah. And if that other buck would have got through my shooting lane without me getting a shot, I'm pretty sure I would have killed Flyer that morning, because I don't know if he was trying to run that other buck off or if a hot doe had come through before daylight. I don't really know what they were doing, but I mean, both of them come up the same side of the ridge, and I mean they both come within 15 yards of me. But luckily I put a real good shot on that buck, and he only went about 80 yards, and it's this buck here. He's got that split brow. He's got real short main beams. They're not real long, but he's got good mass. Real pretty buck. He's three and a half year old buck.
He's a cool buck. And everyone on the lease last year passed him as a 2-year-old. He was just a sort of a heavy 8-point, but a real nice buck. We didn't get a lot of pictures of him until the rut, did we? I don't think
like November 3rd or 4th, we had some pictures of him right in that same spot on a scrape. And just a cool buck. And I was happy to finally get a buck on the ground after like 30 days of hunting, I think it was. I mean, it was starting to become a grind.
Yeah.
And I was really starting to think that Ohio wasn't going to happen, and I hadn't got anything in West Virginia, so it was starting to wear on me a little bit. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, and that late rut this year, that was we had Jared's cell camera. Actually, it wasn't even mine, but we were watching every nice buck that we had on camera.
Yeah, every buck.
Come into this spot not far from where he killed that buck. It's just across the road. A little patch of pines that border a small clear cut, I guess. It's like
strip
off of a right of way, off of a power line right away, and there's this little strip that had been cut several years ago, and then I don't know, 15-year-old pines maybe. Yeah. They're not very old pines. Yep. And that edge right there, I mean, it torn up, just absolutely destroyed with sign. We put that cell camera in there, and we started getting pictures, and I knew immediately, as soon as we started getting those pictures, daylight pictures of every big buck we had. Yeah. And I was like, I'm hunting it. And at that point, my dog was still sick, so I was throwing daytime hunts. Like, any chance that I had, I was like, all right, I'm driving down. It's a little over 2 hours to get there. I'd get up at 3 and throw my stuff in the truck, get down the road, and get there right at daylight. And had some really, really fun hunts, really cool hunts. All of them I sat all day. But learned a lot just because the wind was what it did up on top of the hill once it hit those pine trees. I don't know if it's a pine tree thing. I don't know if it's that spot, but the wind swirled so bad in there. And I think that had a lot to do with why those bucks were traveling through that area, was the way that the wind swirled in there. I think they got in there and could get on that edge and smelt every doe within, shoot all the way to the top of the hill, all the way back down to the bottom. And it made it tough to hunt.
What we noticed was on a northeast wind, any day there was a northeast wind, every buck on the property would go through this spot. Every single buck. They would be there in the morning. They would be there in the evening. If there was any kind of southwest wind or whatever, they're not in there. Yeah, it was just so we kind of figured out. We still need to go over there and check it out, but we think that they're bedding on this side of the ridge on that north wind, which makes perfect sense. Right. So we're gonna
it was really interesting. The way that the wind went through those pines was really interesting. Makes you. That's what I like so much about. Really, really checking wind all the time and checking thermals and everything and throwing milkweed all the time, as you learn so much about how important it really is to deer and how much that dictates what they do throughout their entire day.
Absolutely.
There's not a time in a big buck's day, or not very many of them, that he's going to be like, nah, screw the wind, I'm going to go over and eat this corn. Like he's thinking wind the whole time, and it's hard to get the advantage sometime. And in that spot, I'm pretty sure twice it was a big buck. I'm not sure, or I think it was a big buck. In that, probably within 100 yards of me. Once I saw a huge bodied deer get up stand up, and go over the hill back down to where Jared's spot, where he killed his buck.
Across the road, yeah.
And then the other time, I'm pretty sure it was a big buck. As soon as I got set up, I heard one sort of, it didn't really blow at me. It made some sort of a noise between a blow and a sneeze. And I was like looking and trying to find it. And then I heard it run off, and it was a big deer or whatever it was. It might have not been a buck, but So what was really cool about that too, I got to watch these does because I sat all day, daylight to dark. I got to watch these does that busted me in the morning. They busted me and winded me, and they ran off. And these trees weren't very big. Like the first one I set up in, and because I wasn't real sure, like I said, we didn't have anything preset. The first tree I set up in was a little pine tree, just tiny little pine tree. And I climbed it, made a ton of noise. Had one of those mornings where it's just like everything you do sounds like an elephant running through the woods. I climbed this tree, got in it, waited till 9 o'clock and got down because of the wind and changed to a different tree. So those does had left. They winded me, left, and then came back about 6 or 7 hours later. And they came in. They never saw me, but they had winded me. When they came in, they circled downwind to the whole spot, and then came in directly to the tree that I climbed, and were smelling it, licking it, and like just all over that single tiny little pine tree that I had climbed before. It was really neat how they pinpointed exactly where I was before, and then used their noses to go see what it was and figure it out. And they knew I wasn't there. The scent must have dissipated enough that they could still smell it, but were like, it's not there anymore. It's not a danger to us. Yeah. So it's really neat to watch, and that kind of stuff. If you pay attention to that sort of stuff, you learn something every time you're in the woods.
And that's a good point too. It really shows how observant these deer are. Even after you leave, they're still you got to take into account your access routes and where you're walking. Where you're leaving ground scent at, because if you're walking right down a deer trail and they come through 10 hours later, they're going to smell you.
Yeah.
And we don't really know what effect that has, but every little bit of pressure is going to add up to something in the end. Yeah. So if you're walking in and out of there and leaving all kind of scent, they're going to figure you out, even if you're not seeing it happen. They're still busting you.
Which I think is a big factor in the October lull. A lot of guys hunt a small piece of property and put their ground scent down for a week or 2 weeks straight, and then their bucks, they don't leave. They're just not going to do the same thing that you're doing, and that's I think a lot of people confuse that with what people call the October lull, and think that these bucks just lay down for the entire month of October. It's not quite. They don't quite do that.
The bedding area that I was talking about earlier, where I had encounter with those 3 bucks. That's a perfect example of access, because my access to that spot is bulletproof. I'm coming in with the wind in my advantage almost every time. I'm walking through an area that the deer don't even use. So I think that is what allows me to hunt that 3 or 4 or 5 times if I need to. But even with perfect access, I'm not getting busted in the tree. After a few days, a few sits, the deer activity just starts to drop off. They're going to catch your scent somewhere. It's it's going to swirl or whatever. But just being mobile and paying attention to those access routes and your exit. A lot of people, I see guys, the hunt's over with, they're throwing stuff out of the tree, making all kinds of noise. You should be just as quiet leaving as you were coming in. I really think that is a huge factor too.
Yeah, that's what the access to that spot. The first couple times I hunted it, the first couple days I went down there, it took me a little while to figure out what really was the best access. And like I said, we didn't really scout it. We just threw a camera up in there, and it just so happened. But there's a gravel road near it, and shoot, I could throw a rock to hit that gravel road from the trees I was hunting.
And you're watching cars drive up and down the road.
And it actually ended up perfect. But one evening when I was hunting there, I get a text of a picture from Jared of a big old nutsack. And I, of course, had to cuss him because he was back here in West Virginia laying him down.
So I come back to West Virginia. I just killed my buck in Ohio on a Monday. I come back and I'm like, well, still got a bow tag in West Virginia. I'm going to see if I can't put it together again. In the very next sit, it basically a run and gun hunt, a spot that Granted actually went with me that day, and we put a cell camera up on one end of the ridge, and big fresh scrape right there. and I got a blurry picture of one buck, and it really wasn't a good enough picture to tell what he was, but I knew there was a decent buck in that area. So I decided just to head out there, had my saddle and all my gear with me, and my plan was just to walk out this ridge looking for sign and just set up on the freshest sign I could find. And that's basically what I did. Got out there, there was fresh scrapes everywhere. I mean, every 25 yards there's a scrape, a fresh rub. So knowing this area from years past, I kind of figured where this deer might be bedded if he was in there. So I just kept pushing closer and closer to where I thought he would be, and there's kind of an intersection on a logging road right there, and there was 2 big fresh scrapes right in that intersection. So I was like, well, I'm just going to get downwind of those scrapes. I think I'm within 100 yards of his bed, so I'm just going to set up here, and hopefully something will come by. And I set up. I think I saw a 6-point. He was chasing some does out of that bedding area. It was getting really close to dark. I was getting ready to pack my stuff up. I kind of whined to the camera on my interview saying, my West Virginia season was probably over and I wasn't going to get anything with a bow. Woe is me. And then, I'm sitting there and I hear footsteps coming. I'm like, there's a deer coming. Then I see a nice wide rack coming through the brush. I'm like, oh man, it's a pretty good buck. And he walks right to those scrapes. He's facing me with his head up, working the licking branch. I come to full draw, and he had no clue I was there. He took 5 steps to his right, and he's perfectly broadside. And I just smoked him right through the heart. Took 2 jumps, and he fell over dead on camera. And I freaking lost it. It was just one of those hunts that rarely works out that perfect. I do not hunt over scrapes hardly ever. I just don't put much stock in them, but these scrapes were fresh enough. They were close to where I thought they were bedding, and that's exactly what happened. It's this buck here. Pretty solid 8-point. Not a whole lot of mass, but 17 inches wide. Real pretty dark rack. But just a good buck here in northern West Virginia. And this actually turns out to be the buck that I had on camera. Yeah, so I filled my my buck tag on that buck, and got to send Grant and LG a nutsack picture, which I always like to do.
Yeah, you gotta have I don't know, thick skin, a little bit of thick skin to be friends with Jared, because I sat that day. I believe that was the day that I sat 11 hours and didn't see a single. No, I saw a little doe, and that was all I saw. And that was in the spot where every buck was on camera on these winds. But I sat there. It was a forecasted northeast wind, and it didn't blow northeast. It was out of south, complete opposite of what the Weather Channel and Weather Underground and everything said. And then you sit all day and don't see anything. Walking out, I get a picture of a nutsack. You gotta work hard to be Jared's friend sometimes.
He called me a couple choice words that started with an F, I believe.
Yeah, probably.
No, that was a cool hunt, and the day before rifle season in West Virginia. So, if you're going to kill a buck with a bow in West Virginia, it pretty much has to be before rifle season comes in.
Yeah,
so
it's pretty tough afterwards.
So, yeah, after I killed my buck with a bow, our rifle season come in. I hunted the first day. I took my boy Austin. We didn't have any luck. And then it was into that week, right? We decided to do another kayak hunt in the same spot where we went before.
Yeah.
And our buddy Nate from Pennsylvania was down, and him and Grant went in his boat, and I took the kayak, and we kind of split up a little bit. And I started off in the area we originally bow hunted, and just took off hiking basically to a spot on the map I'd been wanting to check out, and I actually ended up getting a shot at a buck. He wasn't a big one. He was a 6-point, maybe 14 inches wide or so, but that would have been really cool to kill one on a kayak hunt, but I ended up hitting a limb, and I missed him at like 40 yards. But
we had fun. I had a fun time. It was demanding territory as far as if you don't know where you're going, you kind of have a rough time. The spot we were at, I expected the deer to be up high. I went from first thing in the morning, went up high, to no deer sign whatsoever. Kind of moved around a good bit, found a good bit of hunter sign, and I think everybody that was there was going high. I don't think there's anybody hunting low.
Yep.
So that made me decide to go down. This is all previously mined property.
Yeah, it's thicker
so
than
it's super thick. There's a big high wall that runs just up from the lake, and I got stuck above that high wall and couldn't get down. Like I was up above it and walked and beat through this super thick brush. Did end up finding some killer spots to hunt and some spots I'd like to go back to, but I was getting seriously concerned that I wasn't
close to dark.
Yeah, I didn't think I was getting down. Phone was dead, I believe, at that point, so I couldn't look at OnX. I knew generally where I needed to go, so ended up finding a log, a tree that had fallen down that high wall, and I shimmied down it with. Granted, I have a camera, a tripod, a backpack, a gun, and shimmied down this log, and had to jump about 12 feet to jump the rest of the way off of it. And man, I tell you, by the time I got back to my boat, I was like, I'm never coming back ever again.
He was not happy at all.
This place is stupid. But there's so much big buck sign there, and every time I go in, I feel like I'll figure something else out. I'm definitely going back.
Yeah,
I think that's going to probably happen a lot, especially early season with a bow. I honestly think you could run some cameras close to the lake, and I think most of the buck activity you're going to find is going to be down low.
Yeah, what I've seen in the few times I've been there, down close to the lake is where all the thicker cover is. When you get up high, it's all big open timber, and it just doesn't hold deer.
Yeah.
So I really think those deer just stay down low, which is convenient. You don't have to climb 1,000 feet to get them.
Yeah. I mean, it would be nice to be able to hunt that, find a couple of good spots down low. Maybe, I don't know, a lot of it had been timbered. There's probably not a lot of oaks, but they do plant some food plots and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool spot.
It's a really interesting place, and I bet during bow season it'd be a ghost town, I think.
Yeah, so we're definitely planning on going back in there this spring and try to break it down a little more and find some more spots. But I think you're definitely going to see some more kayak hunts from us this next year.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe I'll take the Jenny over there a couple times. The Jenny is my boat from my dad bought it for me when I was 16. It's a 12-foot V-bottom, and it's been painted every color in the rainbow. And it's not that heavy of a boat, but it's probably got 150 pounds of paint still stuck to it.
I would say probably all lead-based.
Yeah, probably.
You're going to get cancer from riding in it.
Yeah, but it was a lot of fun. And Nate came down, and he was all over the place, and we just didn't see very many deer, but we did have a heck of a good time.
It was a good time. So that puts us into December. So you still have an Ohio buck tag.
Yep.
So go into that hunt.
Still had an Ohio buck tag. I didn't really hunt. Didn't do much in Ohio. I had pretty much given up. I was like, it's not going to happen for me again this year. But I got one step closer and liver shot one. Ended up my sister and brother-in-law, they have a place up near Mansfield, Ohio. Little, small parcel, lots of ag around, and theirs is just, it's not even really, it's not like it's good hardwoods or anything, it's just some trees. And, probably about 10 acres worth. And he had several bucks on camera, nothing huge, and I was just going to go kill a doe with my buck tag and just call season good. If I could get one more doe, I would have been happy. And he had been showing me pictures the day before and was like, this buck, and he had some nice bucks on camera. So I go in there, just like at 3 o'clock, I'm like, yeah, screw it, I'll go hunting. I'll go out there and shoot one. So I probably wasn't in my tree until 4. Got climbed up, and I guess I can kind of go into my theory on tactical deer baiting, but and people laugh when I say that, but it is absolutely true. You can't just throw out corn and even if you have big bucks coming into it, and set up anywhere and plan to shoot one, it's not going to happen.
No, it won't happen.
So this corn pile, when I got back there, I started laughing because my brother-in-law, who only gets so much time to hunt, he's really busy, and he had a couple other guys were hunting there. There's 5 tree stands and a blind all within 20 yards of this pile of corn. And I looked at it and was like, geez, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get the wind, the way the wind was blowing, I could set up downwind of it and sit back probably about 30 yards. And I climbed I figure it was over 30 feet up into this tree. That was real high, but I knew these deer, while they're in there every single day, are looking at these stands and know where these guys hunt and know what trees they're in. And sure enough, after about 30 minutes of sitting in that spot, I see a buck. I'm pretty sure he was bedded right where I first saw him because he just appeared, and I had just been looking in that spot. And he had a real bad limp, and so I would have heard him if he would have been limping in there.
Yeah, for sure.
He just kind of stood up, and I was watching him through a bunch of trees and stuff, and he was probably only about 80 yards away, and he just stared a hole and kept his nose up and was smelling and paying attention to those stands and that blind. And I think a lot of people mess up doing that, and I don't have a problem with baiting. I actually enjoy it. I think it's a lot of fun to bait deer, and a lot of people hate it. But it's not as easy as throwing out a pile of corn and going out and shooting a buck. So anyway, I used their mess ups to my advantage, and this buck came to the corn pile, had a real bad limp, and I put a pretty much perfect shot, probably actually my best shot of the year on this buck. He was quartered away pretty far, and I was going to wait because he was standing in a corn pile. But the reason I didn't wait was because my brother-in-law's donkeys started going crazy and just started hee-hawing. And he told me, he said, every time those daggone donkeys start making noise, these deer just take off. And I was like, well, shoot, I ain't going to let that happen. So I took a pretty hard quartered away shot, entered high and just in front of his back leg, and it actually lodged in his brisket and just obliterated the top of his heart and then caught a lung too. And he went probably 25 yards and fell over. It was just it was a really, really good ending to my season. I went in there expecting to shoot a doe and ended up killing this buck, and he was just a cool buck. He's got a lot of stuff going on, pretty heavy, and this antler actually came off when my brother-in-law was dragging him, but he's just a neat buck, has a lot of character, has a couple tines broken off. This one here would have probably been pretty long. Of course, his G3 there probably would have been a pretty good long time, but just a neat buck in general, and probably one of the weirdest ones I've ever killed.
He's pretty wild.
Just a really cool way to close off the 2018 season and finally break this 5-year curse of me not killing shit in this state of Ohio. It killed me. So hopefully it's not another 5 years, but if it is, it is. Well, I guarantee I'll never quit hunting it. But it was just fun. Got to go over there, spend time with the family, and then kill a buck at the same time. So it was a ton of fun.
Yeah, and I know I was sure pumped for him to finally get that monkey off his back. And I almost didn't believe the text when he sent it through that he got that one. Actually, the same night that you killed that one is the same night I killed a big doe with a rifle. So, the late season, I just kind of focused my efforts on killing does because the area that I hunt is just polluted with them, and I wanted to kill as many as I possibly could. So I was actually looking back through the dates, and I hunted 4 consecutive days, and I killed... well, not consecutive days, but the 4 days in December that I hunted, I killed 4 does. So 100% success rate in late season. So the one doe, the last one that I shot, the other 2 were good sized does. They're on private land. There wasn't a whole lot of tactics involved there other than just getting close to where they were bedding at in this laurel thicket and killing them when they come out. But I actually went back to that public land that we've been hunting with a kayak, and my goal was just to hike back in there to another new spot that I hadn't been to and hopefully kill a doe. And yeah, I pulled the kayak up in there and took off walking. I think I walked almost 5 miles that day. I made a big loop and ended up killing a real small little doe. You know, I quartered her out and packed her out, but that was the end of my season, and it was just a fun hunt, you know, just exploring new public land. I actually found some really big buck sign in this spot too, so we've definitely got some spots for this coming year that I think are gonna make for some awesome hunts.
A turkey sign in there too. Yeah, turkey sign is just polluted in that place. So we're gonna be doing some probably kayak and John boat turkey hunting this year. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Plus, that is one of the premier bass lakes in the state too, and muskie lakes. So
yeah,
we might
good spot.
Troll some big muskie lures and call turkeys.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much the whole story of our year. I mean, I don't know if you probably don't keep track of your hours and stuff. I hunted 152 hours, 140 days, and I saw 128 deer.
And I kept track of mine. Jared's wrong.
Yeah.
I hunted 153 hours, 41 days, and I saw 129 deer.
And we killed 4 bucks, a total about 1,000 inches.
Yeah,
for sure. But no, we had one heck of a year. We got some pretty good video, I think. And this next year, I mean, we got a lot of stuff planned. It's going to be a fun year, I feel.
Going to Georgia in
less than a month.
Yeah, less than a month to hunt pigs. For Saddlepalooza, we're going to film every bit of it, and we'll get that stuff out. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to killing another, couple more bucks under 100 inches.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, we're going to get after it here pretty shortly, get some scouting done, find some new spots, and heck, before you know it, turkey season will be here, and then we'll be starting it all over again. So.
Yep.
But yeah, thanks for watching. If you've watched all this so far, we'd like to thank you, because that's a lot of us rambling.
Yeah, no doubt.
There probably won't be a whole lot of people that watch this whole video, but hopefully you enjoyed some of our stories that didn't really make it to YouTube before. So yeah, so like and subscribe and all that happy stuff, and keep an eye out for more stuff.
Yeah, it's coming.
Yep.